Happy birthday, Em. Let everything be awesome. Emily celebrated her birthday, and the cheerful hum of voices intoxicated her. Let it be February 11th. Let it be snowing outside, but we have summer in our souls. Emily's friend, the cheerful Stephanie, raised a toast. And why? Because today is the birthday of our incomparable Emily. Happy birthday, my best friend. The girls clinked glasses and kissed each other on the cheek. There weren't many guests, but everyone was having a good time. The guys, colleagues, and Emily's brother Kevin put on Latin American music and danced so hard that the furniture bounced. The girls, laughing, made bets on who would outdance whom. As a result, everyone lost. The clumsy Kevin, Emily's brother, who was never distinguished by grace, won. But he adored his sister and was ready for anything for her. See? That's what a loving brother means. Emily hugged Kevin and kissed him on the cheek. He beamed with pleasure. Kevin was 5 years younger than his sister, had served in the army, and returned home. He didn't have a girlfriend, and he didn't have time for a personal life. He was preparing to enter a military university and disappeared for training and tutoring. He had before his eyes the example of his sister, who graduated from the university with honors and recently became a senior specialist in a bank. Emily was ambitious and knew how to achieve her goals. Having achieved a certain status, she could afford not to count pennies before her salary. She inherited her parents' apartment, and Kevin, after their death, inherited the apartment of his grandparents, who promised it to him as a child. After the wedding with Mark, Emily decided that they would live at her place, because her husband, unlike her, did not have his own home. The young couple lived in perfect harmony, planning a child as soon as Mark got a promotion. He worked hard to win the favor of his superiors and slowly but surely moved up the career ladder. On Emily's birthday, he had to fly abroad. He was supposed to return in a couple of days. His wife even showed him the guest via video link, and Mark was happy to congratulate his soulmate. The company had fun, completely forgetting about the time. After 2 in the morning, there was a sharp knock on the door. Emily, already quite tipsy, put her finger to her lips and hissed at everyone, "Quiet, kids! I wonder who has come to visit us." Continuing to clown around, she opened the door and fell silent, seeing an angry neighbor. It was a tall, slender man of about 30, with expressive dark eyes. Emily felt goosebumps run down her body when she met his gaze. "Sorry to interrupt the fun," the neighbor said emphatically, "but it's late, and it's still too noisy. I don't know about you, but I have to get up early tomorrow morning. The prosecutor's office should also sleep at least at night." "Well, that's if your conscience is clear," Emily blurted out before she could figure out what she was saying. The neighbor smiled grimly. "It's clear. Take my word for it. Or will it be easier to believe on a subpoena?" "No, no. I understand everything perfectly the first time," the girl smiled charmingly. "Sorry for the noise. We're leaving now. Good night. This won't happen again." "I hope so." The neighbor said goodbye and went to his place downstairs. When he left, Emily, who had suddenly become serious, asked her friends and brother to leave. "Come on, it's still a children's time." Kevin was indignant, but his sister firmly asked everyone to go home. "I wouldn't want to be charged with disturbing the peace," Emily smiled. "And this guy can. He works in the prosecutor's office." However, it took no less than 15 minutes before the guests, relaxed from alcohol and food, began to disperse. Almost everyone used taxi services, otherwise they would not have left the yard. Emily somehow put things in order and fell asleep. All night she dreamed of a handsome neighbor who asked her to be quiet while she was spending time in his arms. Emily jumped up at the sound of the alarm clock. She quickly took a shower, brushed her teeth, and rushed to work. She wanted to be there as early as possible, so as not to run into a neighbor on the stairs or in the elevator. Although on the way to the bank, her own fantasies made her heart sweetly ache. God, what eyes he has, they just burn through you. And his hands. Emily imagined these strong, beautiful hands hugging her and pressing her to her neighbor's muscular chest. "Emily, wake up!" The guard's voice came from the elevator. The girl only now realized that she had missed the 3rd run, and they began to look at her with curiosity. Realizing that she was giving rise to gossip, Emily quickly entered the elevator and went up to the 3rd floor, where her department was located. All day, she tried to get her neighbor out of her head, burying herself in work. Everything that needed to be done in a week, Emily in this mode did in a day, and enjoyed the realization that she still had a lot of time left. Mark will arrive only tomorrow evening, which means that she will have time to clean everything up before his arrival. But one thought haunted her: a neighbor. On the way home, the girl bought a package of dark beer and snacks. Entering the elevator, She pressed button 6 instead of button 7 and exited to see her neighbor. He was at home and looked at her in surprise. "Hi," Emily smiled. "I wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding last night. It's just that I had a birthday yesterday. It's usually quiet here. I thought we weren't bothering anyone, so I'm sorry." And as a sign of reconciliation, here, Emily, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, took out a package of beer and snacks. The neighbor smiled and hesitantly invited her in. "I will gladly accept your apology. I didn't catch your name." He looked at Emily questioningly. The girl introduced herself and suggested, "Can we use the informal you with each other? You know, neighbors and such officialdom." "I don't mind," the man responded and gave his name, Daniel. "Well, Emily, let's drink to our acquaintance. I suggest we move to the living room. It's not very cozy here." Emily obediently followed him. She liked men who took the initiative. Daniel sat her down in a soft armchair by the coffee table. He went to the kitchen himself, laid out snacks, brought beer mugs and sliced fruit. Emily appreciated his efforts and smiled. "You're good. You know how to make an impression. It's not for nothing that you work in the prosecutor's office." Daniel laughed and poured beer into mugs. "And you're cool. I didn't think I'd have such a beautiful and cheerful neighbor." The conversation between them went very at ease, as if they had known each other for 100 years. Emily noticed that Daniel was looking at her with undisguised interest as she was at him. At some point, he moved closer and hugged her. Emily's eyes swam from his touch. Responding to his passionate kiss, she whispered something unintelligible as if in delirium. Daniel easily lifted her into his arms and carried her to the wide sofa. Emily was ecstatic from his kisses and caresses. She still didn't understand the reality of what was happening. Yesterday, she saw this man for the first time and wanted him like no one else, even her own husband. When they both got tired and leaned back, Emily gently stroked Daniel's shoulder and whispered thoughtfully, "You know, when I saw you yesterday, I wanted to surrender right there, on the landing in front of the apartment. It just blew my mind." "Yes?" Daniel squinted at her and pointed to her wedding ring. "You're married?" "Yes," Emily confirmed. At the mention of her marriage, she became slightly gloomy. For the first time, the thought flashed through her mind that she had rushed into choosing a husband. "It's all very complicated with me." Daniel looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. "But I don't want to talk about it. You better kiss me." They hugged again, and Emily fell asleep only in the morning, clinging tightly to his strong shoulder. When she woke up, Daniel was gone. He made her breakfast and went to work, leaving a note. That was magical. "Kisses. You're D." There were keys nearby. Emily slowly took a shower, had breakfast, made the bed, and closing the door behind her, went up to her place. At home, she felt a sense of melancholy when she thought that Mark should be back soon. Usually, when her husband came from a business trip, it meant a night of love. But Emily didn't want it anymore. She could see Daniel's face, looking at her so that her stomach was cramping with desire. "Damn, what now?" the girl thought desperately. She had been married for less than a year and had already managed to cheat on her husband, the one she thought she loved madly. And where did this Daniel come from? Emily's alert ear caught the sound of the door opening downstairs. She immediately ran to the exit. Looking out, the girl saw a young woman with a child in her arms entering the neighbor's apartment. The baby was about a year old. At the sight of the stranger, Emily had a headache. Who is she? Is she Daniel's wife? And he has a child. Well, things are going great. She was unable to do anything. She wanted to call Daniel a liar and a traitor, but she didn't know anything about him. He didn't say he was married. And who is this woman with the child to him? Why does she have the keys to his apartment? If this is his wife, then it was he who deceived her. And it's unpleasant to realize that she became the cause of adultery. By Mark's arrival, Emily forced herself to put the apartment in order, cooked his favorite dish. She tried to enjoy her husband's presence, but at times her gaze became absent-minded. Her husband did not immediately notice the change in her behavior. "Emily, what happened? Are you all right?" he asked caringly as they walked to the bedroom. Emily shook her head. "Yes, everything is fine, don't worry." However, when Mark hugged her and led her to the bed, a strange numbness came over the girl. She saw the face of a neighbor instead of her husband's face. Mark looked at her like a hungry beast and tried to undress her as quickly as possible. Early in the morning, Emily found that Mark was not around. Some drawers were open. His clothes were missing from them. Not understanding what was going on, she began to dial her husband's number, but in response, she heard short beeps. What's wrong with him? Emily bit her lip. Did he guess about Daniel? Then it seemed to her that something was white on the floor. Picking up the piece of paper, Emily felt cold. It was a note from Daniel, which he left her after that night. And she, fool, did not destroy it. In the evening, Mark didn't come home to spend the night. Instead, an unfamiliar man appeared on the doorstep, a little older than her husband. "Excuse me, Mr. Dawson asked me to pick up his suitcase with his belongings." "What's wrong with him?" Emily jumped up. "Why didn't he come and answer the calls?" "I can't know that," the man answered shortly. He took a couple of Mark's suitcases and left without saying where. Emily was left at home alone. She saw no point in looking for her husband if he didn't want to communicate with her. He won't show up until the end of the week. I'll file for divorce, Emily thought. Only now did she realize that she didn't regret a bit about what had happened between her and her neighbor. Bitch. Mark could barely move his tongue. He was so drunk. The man could not forgive his wife's betrayal, having discovered a note at the dressing table in the bedroom. It was magical for him. Damn it. When and with whom did she manage? Huh? I hate. The man leaned back and passed out. Mark was in a cheap hotel room for business travelers, where he had repeatedly come before flying out. He told Emily that he was leaving on such and such a day, although in fact he was flying out the next day. He could not deny himself the pleasure of spending time with Ariana, a beautiful intern from the client relations department. From the first days in the company, the girl began to show Mark unambiguous signs of attention. Realizing that he had taken the bait, she asked the authorities to send her on a business trip with this nice employee, about whom they said that he was a real family man. But at the first seemingly accidental error in the flight schedule, the family man could not resist. He fell right into the arms of a quick-witted beauty who guessed to confuse the dates. Standing naked in front of Mark, Ariana remarked carelessly, "But we will have plenty of time for pleasant things." Mark didn't find anything to answer. He just hugged her tightly and threw her on the bed, from which both got up only in the morning. Ariana was on full alert. "We have to go. Boarding soon?" Mark hastily washed, dressed, and ran after her. In the office, Ariana was like an impregnable fortress, and the man appreciated her game. But when they returned to the city, she again confused the dates and won them another day for lovemaking. 6 months have passed since then, but Emily didn't know anything. Mark was comfortable with his wife not knowing anything, and he was sure that she would never cheat on him. What happened? Is she really taking revenge on him for the betrayal? But who could tell her? The more Mark thought about it, the more he became convinced that Emily had done it on purpose. Surely, she asked someone to write a note on behalf of some D and planted it in the bedroom for Mark to find. And he found it and acted like an idiot. He ran away and even took his things. No, that won't do. We need to do something. Emily looked in astonishment at her husband, who was standing on the threshold of the apartment the next day. He hesitated, not daring to look up at her. "Emily," Mark mumbled, "there's this. Give me a chance to fix everything. Let's start with a clean slate. After all, we ourselves are largely to blame." "What's going on?" Emily asked mockingly, not taking her eyes off him. "It sounds like you managed to do things. You already know, right?" Mark asked in a fallen voice. He still didn't look at her, fiddling with his scarf in his hands. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to, but it happened." Ariana turned my head. I couldn't resist. It's damn hard when a naked beauty walks in front of you. "What did you say?" Emily asked quietly. "Are you trying to tell me that you've cheated on me more than once? When did you get the time? During business trips? Answer me." It was only then that Mark realized that he had said too much. The man tried to turn everything into a joke, but the main thing was said. He confessed to treason. Emily's face flushed with anger. "Then I don't understand what you're doing here," she hissed. "You ran off to the left more than once, and now you're offering to start from scratch? The hell with it. Get out before I call the police." "Calling the police requires a more compelling reason than my confession of treason," Mark said thoughtfully. "Don't get excited. Many men cheat on their wives on their husbands. Just not everyone admits it. Here you are, for example. Want to say that you did not cheat on me while I was away?" "No," Emily replied, looking at her husband with contempt. After thinking, she decided to burn all the bridges. "Until your last trip." Now it was Mark's turn to gasp for air. "What did you say?" "Repeat," he roared, trying to enter the apartment. Emily wouldn't let him in. Neighbors began to come out to the noise. The girl listened with bated breath as the door to the apartment downstairs opened. Daniel's voice was heard, "Go to bed. I'll go find out what the noise is." Going upstairs, he looked at Emily and Mark in surprise. "Sorry to interrupt, but don't you think it's time to be quiet?" he addressed the spouses sternly. Daniel acted as if he was seeing Emily for the first time, and the girl felt uncomfortable. Listen, man, Mark said without looking at his neighbor. Get lost in a good way. We're talking to my wife, and you're interfering. Do you need it? I need it to be quiet at this time, Daniel replied harshly. I have a small child, and he is also sick. And you're making a scene here. Emily's eyes darkened at his words. So it's really his child. And that woman is his wife. But what about her, Emily? Why did he kiss her and write romantic notes? Mark realized that it was better for him to leave. Emily did not specify with whom exactly she had cheated on her husband and filed for divorce. A month later, Daniel knocked on her door with a bouquet of flowers. What do you want? Emily asked gloomily, looking at him without any interest. We need to talk, he replied and offered to go up to his place. At first, Emily refused, but then decided that nothing bad would happen. She had already experienced the most unpleasant thing. Meet my sister Megan and her son, Jake. Daniel introduced the stranger with the child. They'll live with me while Jake is undergoing treatment. What? Emily's eyes widened. She's your sister? Not your wife. I've never been married with my job, Daniel grinned. I asked Megan to come myself. Her husband left her when he found out that his son had health problems. Now everything is fine with him, and Megan wants to go home. She's leaving tomorrow. Emily and Daniel saw Megan off at the station. The girls said goodbye warmly, promising each other to call. Will you come visit? Daniel asked unexpectedly when they were in the entrance. Emily shook her head. Some other time. I'm tired. I can help you with insomnia, Daniel winked at her. And in general, after everything that happened between us, I have to marry you. Despite her feelings for Daniel, Emily did not immediately agree to marry him. But when she agreed, she never regretted it, and neither did he.